Today's episode is brought to you by Sports Business Classroom. Landing a job in the NBA is no easy feat. One surefire way to put yourself in front of a competitive talent pool is if you master the collective bargaining agreement. And now you can, with a course developed by the godfather of the CBA himself, Larry Kuhn. Larry Kuhn has been teaching the CBA to teams, agents, media, and students for over 20 years, and now you can master the CBA through his online video on-demand course, which is now available to the public. If you're looking to break into basketball or even just set yourself apart, this is the competitive advantage you are looking for. To learn more about the video on-demand course that is being taken by teams and agents all over the world, please visit sportsbusinessclassroom.com today. Welcome to the Sports Business Classroom audio experience. I'm your host, John Hartofilis, and today I'm super excited to bring you a special episode highlighting the career of NBA Summer League co-founder Warren Legarie and his secrets to building relationships in the NBA. This episode was recorded by our No Trade Clause team. No Trade Clause is a comprehensive resource created by SBC alumni about NBA transactions, draft capital, contract and league deadlines, upcoming free agents, and salary cap figures for all 30 teams. Warren shares some insight about the inception of NBA Summer League, his steady rise as a league agent all around the world, representing hundreds of players, and tidbits of wisdom that he's gained over a prosperous 30-plus year career in basketball. And now, I'll turn things over to Aaron Washington and Ali Shafiq from our NTC team to kick off this interview.
Welcome back, one and all. This is the NTC podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Washington, joined by fellow NTC contributor Ali Shafiq. Glad to be back here on another broadcast with you all. This time, we have the very special opportunity to speak with one of the greats in the NBA space, specifically NBA Summer League, one of the pioneers of the program. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Warren Legarie, Executive Director of NBA Summer League, as well as the President of WGL Management. If you need to know how legit this guy is, just go take a peek at the Summer League scene. You'll see him chopping it up with Adam Silver in the big shots in the in the Thomas and Mack Center. So that should tell you all you need to know about what this man has done here in the NBA space. But Warren, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Adam was afraid I was going to charge him, so he's talking himself out of having to pay for a ticket.
You do what you got to do to help him out, right?
I also want to make sure there's a disclaimer. I didn't write any of that introduction. Okay, just keep it. All right. So,
guys, Warren just forwarded us each about $50 to a nice little intro there, and then we got
you guys went too cheap. Okay,
we'll charge more next time for sure. But yeah, we just want to take a few minutes here with Warren and just get a little bit of insight on his background in the agent world specifically, and then also just the origins of Summer League, how this came to be to where it is today. It's been a long journey to where it is today on the big networks, ESPN and such. But we just want to start with you, Warren, and get started here talking about your journey as an agent specifically, because that's how you got your start in the field. You started as a player, you transitioned into that role, like we just spoke about here a few minutes ago. But basically, if you don't mind, this is a little bit of a rehash, but we just wanted to know about your beginnings in this field. So you'd mentioned that you played basketball a little bit, and then that kind of got you into the sport, and you had a kind of a unique experience after that, as far as what you did prior or what you did after that. So if you don't mind, take a few minutes and just let the crowd know what came before Summer League and chopping it up with the league execs. How did you get your start in the basketball field?
Well, part of it is if you fail at something, you don't want to be a dumb shit, so you try to go ahead and try to succeed at something else. And I never I finally realized after 2+ years of college and also where I was playing basketball at the University of Pacific that it really I wasn't responding to it as much as I should have been. And it just, I felt that it wasn't addressing a lot of the areas that my wanderlust and my wanting to roll up my sleeves and go and do something as opposed to theoretically talk about it, because that's what school just felt like to me. It gave me a good sort of guidance in that I learned to ask very tough questions about myself and my life and not just take things either for granted or just assume that things are going to work out. A lot of it is how you address your life and your direction. There's an old expression that if you don't know where you're going, every road leads there. Well, I was on every road. I really wasn't sure where I wanted to go. And but once I told the coach that I didn't think he was handling his job as well as he could have, I was now an ex-scholarship guy. And so I had to go find real life. And I had met somebody during the summer, where I used to work in the produce area, because you could grow your hair very long. Nobody cared less of what you looked like. All they wanted you to do was work hard, and it was $2 an hour. You didn't have to report it. So it was $2 in your pocket. So I used to work for that for every hour. And I met this guy who dressed very well and was pointing at people to do hard labor, and he was doing no hard labor and loading trucks. And I'm going, that's appealing, because if I'm working with my hands, I'm making $2, and I find out he's making way more than I, just working with his mind. And that sort of got my attention. But I went into the produce business after I left school. It was in like January, and that's when things down in Mexico, that's where most of the where the U.S. gets most of its fresh fruits and vegetables, because it's more of a summer season down there, better weather. And I was working at the crossings, working from literally about 7 a.m. until 1 p.m. every day, because everybody wants to eat, and that stuff keeps coming. So it was a wake up moment that, look, there are a lot of niches in this world. Here's one that I never even heard of or do, other than, during the summer months, I used to go and just, do hard labor for a couple bucks an hour. And I started getting into being a broker of fresh fruits and vegetables to clients around the country, especially on the West Coast. And one of them turned out to be a place called Crown Produce in Los Angeles. And I got to know the head seller over there, and he liked some of the deals I was putting together, and invited me to come and work. What I didn't understand when he said come to work, when I came to LA, generally it gets too warm down in Mexico as you get closer to June, so it burns up the fruit. So most of the stuff is now coming from the US anyhow. So I went there, and I literally went to work hand trucking to learn the business the old fashioned way, from the ground up. So I literally was moving around 10 boxes of tomatoes or 5 crates of cantaloupes or stuff to legitimize myself. No matter what, you've got to prove that you belong to something. You can't just walk in and say, hey, I'm joining the club. They don't want you as a member like that. They want you to earn your way in. And so that's all I did. And within a couple summers, I was now a salesman on the street. And one of the interesting things about that business is it literally prepared me to do what I'm doing now, because that whole business is about leverage. You have to know when there's an oversupply of fruits to be able to drop your market quickly before everybody else does, so you can get out of it with at least somewhat of a profit, or as little of a loss as you can. And then when things shorten up, you make sure you know that, so that you don't give away some of your product for lesser monies, and you're able to jump the prices on the same product. You're asking $3, now you're asking $6. Well, that helps your margin pretty good. And those are the things that help me develop an understanding of being an agent is nothing more than understanding your leverage, and when you can step on the gas and when you got to put the brakes on in order to not look foolish, and more importantly, where you're still helping your client get the best deal possible. So from there, I was doing it, but it got a little bit redundant, and it was something, even though I was making fairly good money, it was not something that I foresaw as my future. It just didn't feel as if that was the calling that you're always listening for. And I happened to walk into Loyola Marymount during a summer league, because I'd heard that, hey, there's some basketball going on, and I wanted a chance to get over there. And I stepped into a summer league that would, from that moment forward, capture my heart, my mind, and my emotional commitment. And so from that point, I decided I wanted to be an agent. There's only one small problem. You can say you're an agent, but if you don't have a client, or you are as a guy talking about being an agent, until you get a client, that's when you're an agent. But the one thing I quickly realized there, and people don't realize, there was the world of agentry had already evolved, even though the monies weren't spectacular, and they weren't in those days. The agents were all good. They were really solid backgrounds and stuff. They're on Grinkers. Larry, the one who used to be head of also the Players Association. I'll think of his name. But there were guys who just knew what they were doing. And I'm saying to myself, why would a player hire me when he had a choice of hiring those guys? I would hire me. And so at that point, the one thing you could always hear at Loyola Marymount with a lot of foreign languages. There's a lot of stuff internationally going on, because the European teams use that as their as their sort of, their G League. They were finding, players for their rosters, and it would be there that they'd locate them. And a lot of agents weren't necessarily, enamored with doing business in Europe because they always felt that they would lose their client and never get them back once they were out of sight and out of mind. For me, I saw that as an opportunity. Like, if people don't want to do it, I do, because it was one of the few areas where I could develop an expertise that very few people had. And the truth of the matter is, I hadn't traveled other than that one trip to Japan and being out of Mexico. I was looking forward to an international experience. And so it just happened to hit me at the right time. I think it was a little about 30 years of age. And it was a magical moment. First year, got my ass kicked, had one guy, he got cut, still looking for the commission. So I ended up losing money my first year. Second year, I picked up a couple guys. One of them got a job. So I still hadn't broken even yet. Third year, I think I had 4 clients. And by then, I broke even, which meant I didn't care. From that point forward, I knew I could be in this business and I didn't have to go backwards. I'd be able, as long as I met my expenses, I was happy as a pig in slop. Okay. That was what I wanted to do. And then slowly teams over there realized that I spent enough time that, and learned the languages, that they could kind of count on me to be their eyes and ears for different deals, because there are a few other agents really doing that over there. And so I found another little niche where teams would use me to not only scout, but ultimately to act on their behalf to bring players from the U.S. to play there. And in those days, there was only really Italy, and Spain was just coming around. It was still, their basic pay was for most players between 60 to 80,000. You'd still get the Barcelonas and the Madrids who would pay in the 150s, but it was hard to get those players. They wouldn't take rookies. They're always looking for more veteran guys because their teams were already established and they couldn't, handle a rookie making all those mistakes, because every game was vital to the teams of that stature. But slowly I met, they started asking me about some players, since I had some luck with some of the players that I brought over. And slowly but surely, I built up a world with no NBA connection whatsoever. It was only about Europe. That's all I did. And truth of the matter is, I couldn't have been happier. I found my world that I was looking for. I was in a different city every day, or I'd fly over to Spain, but it was a world that I had never had the privilege of either knowing or experiencing. And I was getting paid to learn cultural differences, to be a part of something that was historical and things that showed you that if you do things right, they last. When I was walking around the Coliseum, you're going, how is this thing still here after thousands of years? Because they built it right. So that became a metaphor for my world. If I build it right, it'll last. And it will continually create, the fruits of, of possibilities, because I laid down the right foundation. And, but then all of a sudden, players from Europe started to becoming a little attractive to the teams, because they usually, the best players are the ones who had played enough years, so you could get a pretty good gauge whether or not they would fit, even though the NBA coaches weren't totally on board with the GMs at the time. That the GM saw the talent, all the coaches saw was somebody they couldn't communicate with, and they were never going to use in a crucial moment, which is a huge mistake, because basketball is one language, win. That's all what everybody wants to do. And most kids have enough instincts, and certainly have gone to enough clinics where they understood enough basic English that they would certainly have no trouble communicating, or understanding what most coaches had to say. But the coaches didn't believe that, and that was the only thing important. So my first real major client, the first one I brought over, first Western European, was a guy named Fernando Martin, who played for Madrid. Ironically, played for George Karl, who had over there coaching in Madrid, and he wanted to play in the NBA, and we got him to Portland. But for the reasons we just talked about, coach was Mike Schuler. God rest his soul. I know he just passed, but he didn't trust Fernando because he didn't trust the language barrier. So they didn't really play, and Fernando got frustrated and then went back to Europe the following year, and unfortunately, passed in a horrendous car accident just before arriving to the game. And then the next great player I brought over was Drazen Petrovic, also to Portland. And Drazen was as unique and talented and charismatic and all the wonderful things that made him what they called, and believe me, it wasn't anything physically connected, but the Michael Jordan of Europe, because of the way he dominated Europe. And he was something to behold. And Portland, the management really felt they needed him, but again, it was Rick Adelman was the coach, and he chose to play. What's his name? I remember this, Danny White over Drazen, and that was, to me, criminal. It was criminal neglect. So ultimately we worked out a situation where he went to, we made a trade to New Jersey for Bill Fitch, and the rest is history until the unfortunate accident for two. So I literally was involved with two great players who unfortunately met their untimely death through horrific car accidents. It's not something I hope ever happens a third time. So, but now I started to develop a little bit of a niche in the NBA, primarily with overseas players who knew that I understood them culturally, that I understood what they were going through, that they weren't kids from Kansas, that you could just tell them, shut up and wait for your turn. You couldn't do that because they were, so heavily, relied upon on their teams where they're stars. And now you're asking them to be basically scrubs. And it's unfair for coaches to see them that way. And I'm not asking coaches to all of a sudden, change their substitution pattern based on the fact of a cultural, but they certainly were good enough to play, and just coaches were reluctant at that time because, again, the always lurking, failure to communicate. And it's only thing Bill Fitch says was, he used to say, well, Drazen, I keep trying to tell him he's got to play defense. So the night he scored, I think it was 42 against Houston, I said, how was his defense tonight? He goes, it was way better. I liked his defense tonight. I said, good. So we're communicating here pretty good, right? But like always, it takes a while for the world to catch up with there's perception and reality. Reality was European players are going to play a major part. Perception is always 20 years behind, especially in those days. The Europeans, they don't get it. They're not as strong. They're not as fast. But they were way more skilled, and they knew how to move the ball, which no matter what defense you're playing, your defenses are never faster than a ball moving. So at this point, now some U.S. players started to look at me as well. And so now I grew a niche as a both an European and an NBA agent, and worked hard. I had people like Ricky Pierce, Terry Teagle, Tommy Chambers, Terry Cummings, people like that. I became known as a guy who could take a player who his career was starting to unravel a bit, and then help reestablish them by finding the right niche for him to go. And so a lot of older players started coming to me. I took Adrian Dantley overseas to a place called, it was right outside of Milano, and took players like Danny Vrains and Darren Days and Darwin Cooks, older players, and Marcus Johnson, who was a superb, gigantic player in the NBA, took him overseas. We were just talking about it the last summer league. So all of a sudden, I'm doing both of those worlds, and it's fun. But like all good things, sometimes they come to an end and not the way you would like them. Europe all of a sudden started to get another class of ownership that couldn't buy soccer teams, so they thought that they could make their mark in the world by owning a basketball team. And they quickly thought that if I spent this amount of money, I bought a championship. Well, no, you didn't. You bought a lot of players. You still need to understand what you're buying and from whom you're buying, and making sure that chemistry also is worked. So these guys started to not pay people, which now the last thing I signed up for was to be a bill collector. And so part of Europe became a problematic that way, where some of the newer ownerships didn't feel this compulsion to honor their commitments. And so slowly and surely, I just moved towards more the NBA side. But it also was where the game itself had changed. And this is where the danger of being an agent, one of the things that emerged in my last, probably just before we started the summer league, they used to call them, instead of payoffs, they call it marketing guarantees. Just like the colleges are now calling where players can use their likeness to gain, is basically we're paying off a player to come to college. Okay, you can call it anything you want, but that's really what it is. And the same thing with marketing guarantees, are a way that we're going to guarantee you X number of dollars against your AT&T phone or against you doing Panini cards. Well, nobody ever came up to the 250 unless you were first or second or third player in the draft and those type of things. So now, instead of you being able to prove that I'm going to work the hardest for you, I know best from basketball standpoint, the agents who got the players were the ones with the biggest checkbooks. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not exactly a motivational sort of speech for you, because no matter what, you like to think that your work means something, that if you get the edges for a player, that, your hard work produced that. And so it took a little bit of the passion away. And having lost Straws in a car wreck, that was somebody who had put a lot of time, energy, and attention. It sort of drains you, and you start thinking, well, some of my players are getting older. What are they going to do with their secondary career? And coaching or being in front offices became an option. And that's literally lucky timing. Everything was when I was able to get the summer league. So I was able to use that in a way of helping promote and some of my clients, but at the same time to find another niche that would give me still relevance in this business. And fortunately, after an uneventful first year, the second year was a little bit more, a little bit more concrete. And then the third year, clearly we had something that looked like it was going to take root. How deep those roots were going to go, you're never sure. You love to believe that what you're doing will matter, but it's like that. When I told you, when I was in Rome seeing the Colosseum, if you lay down the right foundation and don't look at anything more than just do it the right way, don't be cheap, make sure that you put the right energies and efforts in, and treat people the right way, those roots will get deeper and deeper. And then we built our own Coliseum. We built something that's lasted, even though technically it's 18 years, because that's what we played. You have the lockout year and the COVID year, it's 20 years. And as you can probably see from the last one, it's still growing strong. I mean, it's still, there's a need for Summer League because it gives people something they can't find anyplace else. It gives them the Burning Man of sports. It gives them the Burning Man of basketball, where every known creature in the basketball universe can be found there. And we love that.
Right. Yes.
So it's, if you're not at Summer League, you always say to yourself, I messed up. I really missed out. I'm hearing all these stories. I wasn't there. Doggone it.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of atmosphere we want. We realize it'll never be an NBA game, but it's definitely an NBA experience. And that's what we're trying to convey. It's just a little more casual. It's a lot easier to meet people, to hang out with people, and people you never thought you would meet, or like walking next to you or nearby you or sitting a seat away, whatever it is. It makes it a place where you can't think of any other place you'd rather be.
Nope.
Yeah, it's a place where dreams come true. And we're good examples of that so far. So
that's, you know what, you said it better than I could. Thank you very much.
Warren, we definitely have some questions for you regarding Summer League, but before we get there, I wanted to backtrack a little bit, because you'd spoken a lot about these clients that you had acquired over the years, and it was a slow process for you. You started with one, and it started to multiply. You had two. Then I think you said by the third year you had 4 clients. But specifically, when it came to the selection process, how did you go about finding these guys? Did you have certain qualities, certain criteria that you set in place when you're going looking for these guys? How did that work?
Well, it's a difference between eating at Jack in the Box and Maestro's. It wasn't my call exactly, my budget and everything else. But it wasn't, look, you're always flattered when somebody wants you to represent them. But you have to also be discerning enough to know, does that player have a legitimate chance to advance? Where you can be working your tail off, but if they're not good enough, no matter what you do, it isn't because of sometimes, as I remember Corey Brewer once said this on the way to the basket, he said it to Mike D'Antoni after, he goes, I got to the back because he couldn't finish a layup. He says, I just ran out of talent. and sometimes their players just run out of talent. I mean, no matter what, there's only so much you can do. And the last thing you can do is just get caught up into this. I believe so much in you that if I wish it to be true, it's true. Sometimes it's just not going to be true. No matter how much you wish it, it's just not going to be good enough. And those are the tricky things when you're trying to start off as an agent, because you're not going to have many choices about people who want you to represent them. Most of them are people who other people aren't going to represent, but you still can always find the proverbial diamond in the rough. And that's where you hope your background, your experiences, and look, guys, luck plays a big, big, big part in a lot of people's success. To downplay it, it's irrational. It's just not, it's because it is. I don't mean that you use playing the lottery as a business plan. That's not what I'm talking about, because that certainly ain't going to work. But, you get a good situation happen sometimes out of sheer luck. For example, because one thing I always believe, if you're not there, you have no chance. There's no chance to connect with a player or connect with a potential client or a team. So I was everywhere all the time. It didn't matter to me what it cost, but it was daunting, because you realize your life was always on the run, but you had to be wherever there was an activity. I wanted to be there because that gave me a chance. That's all I was looking for, just a chance. And, by bumping in, by being someplace where another agent wasn't there that was supposed to be there, now I filled in and got lucky with that client who says, well, shit, the other guy didn't show up, so you're here. That in itself, just being there is 80% of some success. Mm-hmm. And so I use that to my advantage by just being places. So everybody saw me as somebody who worked harder and tried to be, more committed. And sometimes that alone will get people's attention. If somebody says, hey, who should I go with? Well, this guy's over here is working his tail off. I would definitely talk to him. And then it's up to me to land the plane, okay, afterwards and that. So, but it worked. Fortunately, I can say now that, I expected all this to be the way it did, and I'd be lying through my teeth right here. So I never did, but you never take anything to be expected. You realize what you always try to tell coaches, coach like you're still in the G League. That means every day, use your wits, be clever, do all the things to trick people, whatever you need to do in order for people to see you can really coach. Don't try to defend what you do, attack what you do, to always be better. And so every day, every client would say, geez, you really have other clients? Could you treat me like I'm your only client? And that was music to my ears. That means I was doing my job. Mm-hmm. One time in Europe, I had 100 clients in Europe, all through Italy, Spain. I had 60. And I had literally in Italy, I had 48 in Italy, and I had 30 in there, and I had in Israel and Turkey, and then we're just starting with Russia at that point. Was dependable, not trustworthy, but dependable, and different things. So I was constantly on the go, and made everybody realize that you're as important to me as any other client, no matter if you're making in the 60,000 or you're making 600,000. You're all important, and that's how you've got to be if you're going to be an agent. You can't show favorites. If you do, somebody will hear about it, and you'll have less clients quickly.
That seems so daunting, having so many clients, especially spread over such a wide area. What was the process as far as managing all those guys at once? You just said that you have to treat them equally in order to maintain the respect. But I'm sure that's easier said than done when it comes to, you have 24 hours in a day, and you have
just don't have a life. You don't have a life. That's your life. Every day you're making calls. Every day you have to call somebody within 3 days. Every day. That's what it's like running a marathon. Yeah, it seems daunting when you haven't trained at all for one. Then you start running 5 miles, and then you get it up to 10 miles. All of a sudden it becomes part of your routine. You don't even think about running a marathon. You think, well, how many am I going to do? That's the mentality you try to build up. And you build up enough calluses so that none of this stuff bothers you. But again, what I talked about in the beginning, you don't have any other life. You marry this life if you're going to do it well. And that's what you have to be prepared for some of those sacrifices that sometimes you look back on saying, was that the best investment of my time? And hopefully you'll say yes. I don't regret it. I still feel as if what I did, it mattered. And I still have wonderful relationships with a lot of guys that I've worked with before, and still have. Mike D'Antoni for over 30 something years. I worked with him as a player and coach in Italy. And today we're still I love to believe we're as good of friends. Only he can answer that, but I truly believe it. But I like to. It's true. It comes at a price. Just how much are you willing to pay?
Yeah. So, you talked about building your network. And obviously that's something that is an agent's greatest asset, in my opinion, along with obviously their negotiation skills and being able to realize what their leverage is. But are there any tips that you can share on regarding, how you approach people, how you built your network? Obviously you talked about luck and being at the right place at the right time. And there's a lot of variables that, play a part in that. But
here's the most important thing, I believe, if you're going to be an agent. Because you're in a people business, right? You better like people. There are a lot of agents who go around. Look, they had spoiled milk for breakfast, and they got this, and like nobody wants to approach them. Well, This is a people business. I'm not saying just be like. Obviously, you want to be respected, but people better feel comfortable enough to want to engage with you. So for me, and you'll see this at Summer League, everybody's my best friend. Why not? That's how it should be. So you got to like people. That's got to be the beginning of any time you're involved. Now, if you get into computers and all that, you don't have to like anybody, just like your computer. But these are flesh and blood, and people remember when you mistreat them or you slight them. And then the second thing is understand the psychology of who you're dealing with. Always try to understand beforehand who that person is. What are some of his histories? People love to be flattered. They love to be. Not talked about, but where you're able to bring up something that says, this guy did his homework a little bit. Mm-hmm. It takes a little bit extra. Okay, so be it. But ultimately, it allows you to make an impression that's not forgotten. And recall is huge. Because I always say to guys, especially at Sports Business Crowd, I just got today over 100 and something cards. You know what that meant to me? Nothing. Because I don't know any of these cards, who they are. Why don't you put a picture on there? Now I go, oh shit, yeah, I remember that guy. Oh yeah, I talked. Now I've got a connection. By just getting cards, you know what it means? It means you killed more trees today. I don't want to kill more trees, but I want to be able to chop it up with somebody I remember. Oh yeah. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, that was a good conversation because now I have a connection. But it's one of those things is you want to recall, because if you're quickly forgotten, it makes your trip a lot harder in her business. So I used to wear a Hawaiian shirt to all summer leagues. Why? Because I was a surfer dude that somebody called me or that? No, because I always knew nobody else did. So now people knew how to find me. And they always, hey, you're the Hawaiian shirt guy. Oh yeah, that was me. A recall. I mean, it's tricks. You got to try tricks and stuff, but it gives you a handle so that people remember you for something. It's all you can start. Now, hopefully you'll make a big enough impression or do something for them or provide something for them. So now they feel like, oh man, I do want to know that guy more. Now it becomes incumbent upon them to know you, just not you knowing them. And that's how you create a relationship that hopefully will have that foundation and lasting qualities. Tommy Sheppard. I first met Tommy as a PR guy out of Vegas. He's now a basketball guy. I helped him get there. But when we were talking as a PR guy, most guys say, hey, you're great. You're really good at PR. They wouldn't help them see that next step in their lives. And I took a chance because I was going to alienate the team, but it was because it was something he felt. But together, we were able to, have a connection with each other that, was just beyond just a casual, hey, how you doing type of a deal, because we changed each other's lives. That's ultimately, as an agent, your job is to make, and I'm always like a Peace Corps guy, make the world a better place each and every day, not just your own vocation. If you help others first, you pay it forward so that other people are able to enjoy some advantages, it'll always come back to you. And sometimes in double fold or triple fold. I mean, it really will come back to you because people will see you as a giver and not just a taker. That's part of this Peace Corps mentality. Yeah, you have a profit motive. You got to stay alive. But your idea is every day, I'm trying to make the game a better place. Every day, I'm trying to make this business a better business. I'm trying to make within there, the people that I'm working with, better opportunities. You have to go in with that mentality as well, and not just because it's good for you. No, it's good for the game. It's good for, ultimately, it is good for you, clearly. But you can't put yourself in front of the car.
Mm.
Put yourself behind it or in it, and let that inertia, help propel you forward. The way I saw it. I could be wrong, but that's how I looked at it.
Warren, there's so many different tidbits and great nuggets of wisdom we can glean from this interview. The one I will not forget among everything else is the business cards. When you hand out those business cards, make sure you have some way to make you stand out, because, like you said, you have so many, and I'm sure at some point it's like, okay, who was Jason? Who was Rick? Who was whoever? But if you have a way
all you're doing is guessing. You're guessing.
Yeah,
Don't
exactly.
make it a guess. Make it so it's an imperative. Oh yeah, I remember this guy. That was smart. That's how you start any chance of something potentially happening between you. Without it, there's probably zero or chance. And that's the other thing too that also helps, that I think you should also glean. Your ego is not your amigo. Don't ever let that come into the room first, because if it does, it starts stinking it up big time, and nobody wants to hang out in a stinky room. They'll leave quickly, and you'll be known for something, but not exactly what do you want to be known for. Okay.
Exactly.
So that's the other thing that one of the things that you try, and it's hard. You have a little bit of success, and don't you know who I am? Yeah, you're the guy I'm going to be getting all of my future clients from, because you're going to be forgetting how you started. I'll know exactly who you are. You're going to be a failed agent here shortly. And that's what happens in our business. We're so quick to let everybody know how important we are, how much good we're doing, that you forget to do the good. You forget to do the things that make you important, because you're living off of your press clippings, and you can't live long off of that. Believe me, and that's called empty calories. Okay.
100%. So you've spoken so much about Summer League. It's a big part of a big reason why you're in this space today, and a big reason why, as Ali and I have said, that we're here today. I think it's very important to go back a little bit. I mean, it's a big history lesson here, Warren. That's one of the big highlights of this interview here today, is kind of what started all this. So I'm sure that a lot of people, such as myself, are curious. You and Albert were spearheaded this movement many years ago. You had mentioned that it's been 20 plus years of making this thing happen every summer that have given countless people these opportunities in basketball. But how exactly did this idea come about? There's articles out there that talk about how it grew over the years, but specifically about where the idea came from to not only have a summer showcase, but to have it in Las Vegas. How was that idea conceived?
Well, remember, it's not really genius. It's having two teams in a gym during the summer. Okay. That's not exactly the rocket science. What it was, how do you do it better? Was one of the things that I could tell very few people enjoyed Summer League. It was a have to go to. And there were all these satellite after Loyola Marymount, which people kind of wanted to go there because it was a centralized place. You knew you could find people you were looking for, because ultimately over a 10-day period, you'd be able to find them. But ultimately, when it broke down after Loyola Marymount stopped happening, I forget for the reasons. And then they're trying one in Irvine, and then San Diego State. And then you had some in, Orlando had one, San Antonio had one, you had one in Atlanta, you had one up in Windsor, you had one up in Princeton. All these places, they last for 3 or 4 days, and it wasn't enough time to establish any kind of bonding. Or if you were looking to find somebody, they could have left a day before you got there or a day after, and it was expensive because you're having to fly into all these cities. You go rent a car, you go stay at home, and all the things that could be wrong were wrong. And people wanted more of a centralized place. And at that time, good luck, good timing, how it happens. You're just, if they wouldn't have created a problem for UNLV, Tim Gergovich was still been coaching at UNLV. I never got involved much with colleges. I don't like college. I don't even do college coaches if I can avoid it. It's just not my cup of tea. And so Tim Gergovich was up with he had gone up after they had finished in their run with Tarkanian. He was his lead assistant. He went up to Seattle where I had George Karl, and we sort of connected. And, Vegas is an easy place to live. I'll let you on a secret. I used to think it was my winning personality that made people come. I think they actually like going to Vegas probably a little bit more. And there are a lot, and plus for the tax reasons alone, there's no state tax. A lot of players would locate there, but there was always basketball at the high schools going on. Tim would work out tons of players. Tim Gurovich, nobody really, this guy should be in the Hall of Fame because he literally is the player whisperer. He was the first guy who took player development to another level, a real professional level, and where players got lathered up, not only during, off days, before games, they would come out there and he would build the old, what I talked about before, the marathon. He would have guys running 15, 20 miles like it was a wind sprint because they were so much better conditioned because of the everyday quality that he brought to the table. So Tim would say, come on, man, let's get everything here. This would make more sense. We'd be able to work out our guys, still have games, and people would be able to watch. Then a lot of the things, and one of the reasons that the GERD camp became the biggest camp for early NBA pros as well as coaches, because the Pete Newell camp used to just do drills. They used to have the Pete Newell camp in Hawaii, and you do drills, but you never scrimmage. So you never incorporated what you were learning at a station, either the drop step or the pivot move around the basket. You would never incorporate it into a real live game experience. And that's what the GERD camp took it to the next level, where we would have stations and learn particular moves and then be able to incorporate them into a game-like setting. But they wanted a place where you didn't have to travel so much. You could be in one place. And originally, Rod Thorne was working at the league office. It was a head of operations. And I don't know if this is a very well kept secret, but Rod likes to play the cards a little bit. He likes to maybe gamble, maybe a bet or two. Okay. And I mentioned to him, look, because I had gone and talked to some people at MGM. By luck, I ran into somebody who was looking to try to, bring some sports stuff. And I said, they had this Agassi, the old theater. It was like a tennis stadium inside of the MGM. It's about 3,000 people. They offered it to me for basically free. If you brought teams here, we'll give it to you. Well, free is really an enticing proposition. Okay. It cuts down on your overhead immediately. And so I called Rod. I said, Rod, what if we did this? He goes, oh man, that sounds great. I said, the hardest thing we're going to have to navigate at a summer league is the elevator, or if some people want to take the stairs. You're right there. The game's there, the food's there, everybody's there, card tables are there. What more could you want? But what he didn't bother to tell me, he still had to get it by David Stern, who was, again, remember I talked before about perception, reality? Reality is Vegas was the fastest growing school districts, had a big population off the strip. Perception, low lives, everything is about the strip. Everybody can be compromised. You could be paid off, but it's not true. But that's perception, and it's hard to fight the reality of that. So Stern said, nothing happening. We're not doing it. All right, so that was my first foray, and I tried. After that, we're trying to see where it can make sense, and then I went and we looked at UNLV, which again, no gambling. We tried New Orleans, but that was still connected to a casino, even though it was a long walk. But they still felt that there was the proverbial connection because of the tunnel, so that didn't work. But we tried UNLV, and I was working. Stu Jackson then became the new director of operations for the NBA, and the one thing that, again, luck and timing. I've known Adam before he was the deputy commissioner. I knew him when he was with the league office and he was negotiating a lot of overseas stuff because I would be there all the time when he was there, and we'd run into each other, and we developed a pretty good rapport. And he always wanted to know what I was doing and with whom, because that would help guide him in some of this, whatever it was this mutual, beneficial sort of relationship. And you love the fact that, he was over there with something to really dear to my heart, Europe, because of what it provided for me was a chance to be somebody in this business. And, he just so happened he became the deputy commissioner, and he got that the perception was too far behind the reality that Vegas could be a viable commodity. And it's an easy place for people to go. And you're also not having to play hometown favorites, which is always a problem with teams. It's like, well, I think all All-Star games should be there because you don't displace the season ticket holders who get pissed beyond belief when they know they're not getting their same seats when it comes to the All-Star. Only the sponsors get those great seats. And so all of a sudden there was some traction that, if we did it at UNLV, kept it, we separated the, church from state, I mean, the gambling part of this, and we, try to do it the right way, there would be a chance. And finally, I got the okay after chasing down Stern at the All-Star game in LA at 2004, I think it was. And by that April, which is because the league would have to be done by July, it's not much lead time, but the fact that they gave it, and it coincided with the fact that the year before, Boston had one of the greatest summer leagues in history. That was the summer of LeBron. And they were playing a little bit outside of the city, but it was this great setup, old fashioned, just old school setting. Real basketball. There were 16 teams there, and it was like something out of the movie. So I'm saying to myself, well, I got no chance to compete with that. Holy Christ, who would come to my league? So I've got to really call on my friends if it's going to happen. But as it turns out, it was so successful, more teams wanted to come, but they forgot to book hotel rooms the following year, which is when the Democratic National Convention was coming to town, and they were sunk. They couldn't do it there because there was no room. And so they would have to then, their only option was to go out to Mohican, which was an hour and a half out of Boston. And nobody wanted to do that, including, fortunately, Danny Ainge, who was the president of the Celtics. He says, and I told him, I said, Danny, I got an alternative. He says, well, then get it done. We're in. And so the guy who had the most successful summer league was bailing on his own summer league because he didn't want to go out to Mohican. And they came out. They came out with Perkins. They came out with Jefferson. They came out with Tony Allen. They brought the varsity, and then we, I got Mike D'Antoni, who, because of our friendship, and obviously Brian Colangelo, they're having success, so they said, yeah, we'll be in. And George Karl, who had been helping Denver, Tommy Sheppard, again, history, luck, timing, all these stuff, fortunately come into play. He's in. Jim Paxson, who had become a friend when he was up in Portland, and I'd helped him with a job in Cleveland. He's in. Now we got 5 teams. You have to have a minimum of 6. And again, luck, timing. It just so happened that Orlando hired a new GM who was not a basketball guy. He was from hockey, which means he won't have a preconceived notion about what he's going to do. You could literally talk to him and say, here's what I think. And he would weigh in and say, it makes sense. So they had the first pick in the draft. And that was going to be either Dwight Howard or Emmett Okafor, one of the two. Mm-hmm. And I said, and I explained to him, and I caught him over at Portsmouth. Those were the days when I still would go to Portsmouth to try to talk teams into coming to our place, and in Portsmouth. And I said to him, look, just my experience with summer leagues, I'm just telling you, look, the first summer league is just for a player to realize how fast and how strong the league is. The separate summer league is when you get your C leagues underneath you, where you now feel like you belong. I said, he's going to need, if it's going to be the young kid, the 18-year-old, you're going to have 2 summer leagues. Well, I already knew they were going to take him, but I pretended like if it was Okafor, you probably won't need it. So I was giving him options, but I was being analytical with him before I knew there was the thing called analytics, okay? And I was able to convince him that if it's going to be Dwight, you need that second summer league. He bought in, and so did his coach, Johnny Davis, who ended up becoming a client later on as a head coach. And the rest is summer league history, guys. That's how it, luck, timing, good fortune, right place, right time, right deputy commissioner, because he's the one who convinced Stern, stop with this. It's not the same Frank Sinatra, all the Rat Pack stuff. This is a legit neighborhood place where we'll get a good audience, and bingo, we're here.
It paid off.
We're all here because of it, guys. God bless America.
It paid off big.
Yeah. So we, this is incredibly fascinating, but how did the condition of Summer League, look after a few years, on the scene? I'm sure there were a bunch of challenges as you were continuing to grow the league. But what were their signs pointing to the league becoming a staple of the NBA calendar? What was that inflection point for you?
Well, look, ultimately the whole idea for us, in order to make people want to come, is we had to make them want to come. We had to throw in a few bells and whistles, and look, like all things, and I mentioned this earlier, don't be cheap, spend. One of the things that I saw when I needed summer leagues in order to make a living, I knew that there were 2 or 3 scouts who were influential as hell. They would end up telling, you could see other scouts come to them, and if they felt something was good, everybody else was agreeing with them. Their 3 names were Dickie McGuire, who became a Hall of Famer, who played for the Knicks. You remember him? He was one of the premier scouts. The other one was Scotty Sterling, who was also a GM for the Knicks as well as for Sacramento. I don't know if he was in Kansas City. I think he was in Sacramento. And a guy named Dickie Baker, who was with the Lakers. And those 3 guys, the rest of the league listened to. The rest of the scouts said those were the guys who were the Pied Pipers. We follow them if they think something is good. So as I explained to Albert, we're creating a VIP room. And he goes, well, why are we doing that? And I said, because we want to make sure these guys don't spend their per diem. If they don't spend their per diem, they're going to like us a lot more, believe me. And we want to make sure they can eat something that they come back and say, that was pretty good. So we created the VIP room. You guys have seen it, the red room, okay?
Mm-hmm. The red room, staple.
And we made sure that it cost us money because we come out of pocket for it. But we wanted every scout to know they were going to be taken care of. And again, one of the things that we knew Orlando would start games way too early because they only had 1 gym. We didn't want any game to start. The earliest we wanted it would be potential, and it was because of circumstances we couldn't control, be 12. We wanted every game at 1 o'clock where people could, play golf in the morning, do some of their work, whatever it is, so they could come to the gym later on and then have that evening dinner where they could save a part of their per diem. And we knew we would then get at least a loyalty, a following. And it worked. No matter what. And these are things only by having experienced enough summer leagues, I could see what people didn't like about them, because a lot of what we do is based on what people didn't want. So I make sure we stay away from that stuff. And I make sure that we emphasize the areas that people really wanted. And more importantly, where they really depend on it. And that no matter what is the way, but we also know that you can't just be about basketball all the time, because then you start looking at your watch. You want other things to be coming into play so that there is a social atmosphere to it. There's other where you enhance sort of people interactions and, different parties or educational stuff or a clinic, something that adds more than just the cut and dry, just basketball, watching games, because no matter what, you can only take so much. And if we're going to be a 10-day league or 11-day league, we have to keep it being fresh and still being a want to come to type of a thing. So we would add those. We knew we had to add that part to it. And even though, it was going to be more cost, it was to us more of an investment. That's how we kept looking at it, and not be cheap, and make sure that we're always listening to teams, what they want, but more importantly, what they didn't want. One time it was, they want their own section. They were tired of being bothered. Team player personnel were tired of being bothered by agents. They wanted to watch games. So we created this NBA only section because we were responding to what they wanted. And at first it was unpopular with the league and all that. Like we said, no. I said, guys, I'm doing an executive decision here because I don't want to lose teams. And I was about to lose 1 team just because of that. I don't want to lose any. So that's a big part of doing it. And the best thing that you can do is get lucky enough to find a partner like Albert Hall, and knowing that stuff would just get done. Nobody does it better than him. There is a machine, and then there's the Albert. The machine pales in comparison to the Albert. Okay,
there's levels to this.
It's not a fair fight, guys. Okay, just remember that. So together we were able to figure out. But one thing we knew was each other's weaknesses of what we do, and we allowed each other's strengths then to flourish. And we don't compete with. That's the last thing we do is compete. What we do is enhance, and you need to do that in everything that you do in your life. Don't compete with the other guy. Compete with the only guy. The only guy you compete with is a guy in the mirror. So you don't ever relax. That's the only guy you compete with, not the people to the left or right of you. If that's who you're competing against, what happens when you beat them? You stop? No. So, but with Albert, it was always he would push me to make me better. I would push him to make him better. And, that's luck. In fact, you know how I met Albert? Anybody hear that story?
No, actually, I was wondering about that. How did that come to pass?
It was a long, long, long time ago when Albert was smart enough. Albert's always ahead of the curve. When Seattle was one of the first teams that developed their own practice facility, separate from the arena they played in, that way you would always have the ability to have your players go and work out and do it. And you have a little more control of them too, as opposed to going into arena or some separate arena, someplace where you don't know where they're at. And instead of him becoming one of these private assistants, so he sits in the back with one guy, he says, screw that. I'm going to be out front. So I'm going to be basically the welcoming reception guy that I direct people towards. That way he met everybody. So he would expand his network of relationships. And when I got George Karl, who was in Madrid, and this is when Casey Jones was the head coach and Bob Whitsitt was the GM, and he didn't like some of the way the assistant coaches work. And if you remember, Gary Payton was their first round, like third or second pick in the draft. And it looked like he was about to be waived, like Casey wouldn't play him. And so he wanted to upgrade the assistants. And, I knew Bob decently well. And I had mentioned to him that if you're looking for a really exceptional assistant coach, you should look at George Karl. He's really grown up by being in Europe. It gave him a different perspective because George, a little bit of a hothead when he was in the NBA and, took pride in leading the league in techs and everything else. And no matter what, you still have to, if you're going to be an exceptional head coach, there are times where you have to strategically get angry. Just don't just get angry because you feel like it. And so Europe gave him a little more measure and it matured him and it gave him a perspective of what he no longer had. And when you can see that and feel that, now you appreciate more of what you lost or left behind. And it gives you more of not only the appreciation, but it helps it curbs your appetite about doing things that would potentially push you out of there if you ever got the opportunity again. So Bob finally said, yeah, you know what? I've talked to a number of people, and out of 20 people, 19 told me not to do it. And why are you doing it? Because the one guy who I trust more than any of them, a guy named Jerry Krause, believe it or not, Jerry Krause, God rest his soul, the originator of the Bulls dynasty, and he was the originator. He put the pieces together, the chemistry, all that stuff. But he, in those days, he was working his ass off because he was recruiting overseas players in order for them to keep their budget down, because Michael was costing him $30 million a year. And he was going after Kukoc, if you remember in those days, as well as a couple other players. And, I was still heavily in Europe at that time, and I'd be running across Jerry all over the place. But he happened to see George coach over there, and he was impressed with where George had really matured. George was always a great instinct coach. I mean, no matter what, the guy is a Hall of Famer for good reasons and won over 1,000 games because he gets the game. He understands the game better. It's just that you have to make sure that you're always controlling your emotions so they work for you, not against you in a game. And that's what Europe helped him achieve. And I mean, even guys who, George thought were his good friends said, thumbs down on George. He said, Whitsitt said to me that Jerry Krause gave him the most glowing scouting report on George, that he said, I've got to do it. Now, at this point, Casey Jones is really digging his heels in about, look, Bob, you can't tell me about, who I can have as a assistant coach. And now Bob says, yeah, I think I need to because it's not working. And he says, well, if you do that, you're going to tell me you're insisting, you better fire me then. Bob goes, okay, you're fired. Now, George has already taken off as the assistant coach and lands as the head coach of the Seattle team. Yeah. Believe it or not. And who's up front? Who's sitting there at the desk? So when I come, so George says, hey, listen, my agent's coming in. And Albert goes, well, what does he look like? He goes, some surfer dude. You'll see him in a Hawaiian shirt. Again, remember the Hawaiian shirt, guys, okay? The theme, the reoccurring themes, okay, come back. He grabs me over at the thing, goes, I think you're who I'm looking for. And I says, depends. He goes, are you Warren? I go, again, it depends. What are you asking for? and he goes, George Karl. I said, you said the magic name. So he took me over there, and from that point forward, Albert and I've always connected with him to get to George when I was, helping George with navigate that scenario there. And Albert was also the guy that George trusted to begin. Remember this whole AAU madness? You know where it started, right? Seattle. Friends of Hoop, George Karl. Albert Hall was basically ran that whole program. And that's so fortuitous, yes, lucky, yes, all this stuff, but good people who met the moment and made that inspiration a commitment. And from that point forward, I knew when I eventually got a league that Albert was going to be the very first call I made. It was instinctual. I just knew it. And we hadn't been really in contact. He'd become an assistant athletic director at Irvine and was down there where he wasn't in Seattle anymore. And George obviously had moved on from Seattle. But for whatever reasons, as soon as I got it, I thought of Albert first and then Marnie Colbert second. And the reason was Marnie Colbert, because she was always running Long Beach. So I knew that she would have, one, the experience, but two, she would have the trust of the NBA teams because they're used to her and know what she did. So Albert was the first call, Marnie the second call, and for whatever godforsaken reasons, they both said, sure, we're on board. We're going to go and do with you. I said, I can't promise you what we're going to make. I have no idea what it's going to cost. And they go, all right, doesn't matter. Let's do it. So with that faith, trust, and confidence, we were able to start off on an adventure that, as I said earlier, if you don't know where you're going, every road leads there. And we were going on every road we could. But the first one being trying to get the arena thing down, because that was going to be important for us to do it. But Albert, one of the things that Albert did that really ended up creating the relationship with the NBA was, Albert was always, this guy reached way beyond his height. And he went and got Toshiba as a title sponsor our third year. Well, there had never been a title sponsor of that magnitude at any summer league ever. Usually it was fake shoe companies that the product would fall apart within the second day of using them, or some drink company that was trying to get people to drink all their sugar and everything else in there that would kill them eventually. But there was never a Toshiba. And that's when Adam stood up and goes, whoa, what's going on here? That's when they did when they did our partnership. I didn't say hostile takeover, even though I probably could have at that point. But it was because they saw something new. They saw that, wait a second, Summer League ain't like your dad's Summer League. There's something new and exciting. There's a different reach to this. This is before social media really had picked up the kind of steam that it has, but there was some reach. And what we did is we took Toshiba and we did this, and Albert created this interactive scenario in the concourse for the kids to be playing. They have these computers where you draw on them and you slap them over, and it would save what you drew. And that way coaches could use this for any of their game plans or when they're thinking. All this new stuff, technologies and stuff. And we're making it part of Summer League, which eventually became the STEM part of what we do, when we have, the kids working through that with this group that had won at Sloan, won their research paper on helping young kids using basketball to teach them, mathematics. And from that point forward, it was no looking back. And it was just, how do we keep it fresh? How do we keep it exciting? And how do we make the world know that if you want to see the stars of tomorrow, you better come to Summer League today. And now when you look at our wall between Cox and Thomas and Mack, all the players are on that wall, all started at Summer League. Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, Stephen Curry, who, by the way, was the third best player on his team that summer, because you had Marco Bellinelli scoring more points than he did. And you also had the Morrow kid. Remember Morrow? Anthony Morrow?
Yep, Anthony Morrow.
Record Marcus Banks beat it. Right. That's a story in itself, that he wasn't even the best player on the Summer League team. That shows you what kind of character, what kind of drive this kid has to become maybe as good a player as we've ever seen in one incredibly small but really well-defined body. It's just remarkable what he's done. Nothing short of miraculous what he's done. But he started there. So that's most of my story, and I'm sticking to it, guys.
That's incredible, Warren. We just love hearing about these stories. To top off this podcast, to kind of wrap things up into a nice bow, we've talked about the history, we've gone into the background, all that good stuff, the origins, but just as important as the past is the future. It's, you talked about it so many times. You can't stop when it comes to the development of Summer League. You guys are being innovative. You have the passion, you have the drive, and it's clear that there are even bigger things on the horizon for Summer League now that it features all 30 teams. Everybody who's anybody is there. You have all these interactive exhibits that are coming every year. But now when it comes to the next 5 to 10 years, let's say, of Summer League, I'm sure you guys have a vision. There's got to be a vision. You've taken all these roads to get here, and now it's almost like the sky's the limit. There's so many different paths you can take here. So when it comes to the near future, even the long-term future of Summer League, what do you envision this becoming as far as the growth? What's the next step here? What's the next horizon? What are your goals and aspirations for this thing going into?
I think Albert, if I start talking, will kill me. All right, on that, because we always want to keep it so that people can't wait to be there, so they can see some of the new innovations. But look, no matter what, you can almost feel it this year because of all the different areas we had. It's more of a festival. We're trying to come up with areas that, basketball has to be a central reason why you come, but everybody has also diverse interest besides it. Mm-hmm. People love television, but they got 700 channels. So within television, there are niches in there. So the idea is, how do we provide for everybody's, everybody has a love of basketball, but what is it that they have a desire to learn more of? So we brought in this year through our doctor's program, where we did it, where you can actually see a scope, how a scope works out, a knee scope, where we have the actual, where you can be hands-on, and parts where people are getting operated on. What does it mean? I mean, stuff like that. It allows some kids to go, man, I can be in sports even as a doctor because I'm so close to the action. The refereeing is a big part. We're trying to give them a bigger voice, because no matter what, the only way the game's going to get better is you get better refs. You get more guys who are more motivated to be a ref, who want to be refs. Not that's the only job I could find. No, I want to be a ref. That helps the growth of the game, because the better it's ref, the more they're on notice, the better the game is played, the better the product, and ultimately the more, again, no matter what, the last thing we want basketball to become is pro wrestling, where you can't, believe in the results because you don't feel like they were legitimate. But the other thing is, it's a festival now. There's so many things under the big tent. Do we improve? Do we bring more music? Probably, because that's the other language that sports speaks now or sings, is music. Every great player wants to be a rapper. Every rapper wants to be a great player. So there is an interaction. Or just regular music. Is there a story to be told through film, through a 10-minute TikTok thing? I think there is, because everybody wants to articulate their experience. Give them an outlet. Give them a chance. Let them feel validated by it. Do we have a film festival? I'd like to think that we could. Clearly by having, music will probably fill in more seats by having, again, most of this is where's the marketplace going? That's where Albert and I feel our most valuable, assets are listening. Because if you're talking, you're not getting smarter. You're just regurgitating things that have already happened. By listening, we can hear what people really feel they would like to have. So part of that is, I think that we need to see those areas, eventually allow for us to be able to build more, more desirable things that people are going to want to have. You tell me, what is it, the thing that you think we missed? I'm happy to listen to you guys. You guys right now are a future generation. You know what your needs are or what your wants are better than we do. That's the reason Albert and I are always trying to reinvent ourselves so we can stay contemporary. Where did you feel that we need to go a little bit more at that we didn't do enough of? Do you have a feeling there? I hate to interview the interviewers, but it would help us. But these are the things that we're always wanting to ask people. What is it that we didn't do that you feel we could have had more of? We will be the most accommodating people, because our idea is to make it so you want to be there, not that you have to be there. And that if we succeed at that, this thing could go on for forever, because why not? Mm-hmm. That's how we look at it, because there's always going to be the future stars today. How do you see them? How do you get them? You know, one of my pet peeves, and ultimately, hopefully, the GMs will see it. It's, the first picks in the draft have to play. How do you get better? That's the thing they don't have to play. Why? They have different DNA than the guy trying to make a team who's playing 5 games. Why is that different? No, by them not playing, they also build it in their heads. Hey, I can play when I want. No, that's not an option. No, you're a pro now. You play every day. It's just a question of how much harder you play. And those are the things that I think Summer League, where that is an area that we have to get better at, that people understand. This is your showcase. This is where you make your announcement. This is me to the world. I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to separate myself from the clutter here. I'm going to be a difference maker. And if I start here, it will only become like that marathon where each mile I run is going to be as easier than the last mile I ran. And that's the whole idea, is for them to understand this is where you make your mark. This is where you get on the wall. This is where you where you ultimately predict your all-star nomination by Summer League. And you can see guys who clearly are going to be all-stars. You don't think the kid from Sacramento this year was making a statement?
Oh man, he was incredible.
I mean, even the kid from Gonzaga made it like he was good up there. He was better in our place because he realized, again, remember my second Summer League theory, you find out how strong and how fast the game is. Second one, you get your sea legs. He had his sea legs at the second one.
He did. Yep. And
he made a difference. He was a difference maker. So there, you got that out of me. One of my pet peeves. I hope that we can educate that knowing that by them playing their full cachet of games, it shows they're bona fide. It shows they're legit. That if you're going to be a leader of your team, it's because you outwork other guys. You're always there to count on. Just being available is a talent nowadays, it seems like.
Availability is huge.
That's big. And that's where you establish who you're going to be as a player. I'm going to be a leader of this team. Well, prove it. Be a leader of the Summer League.
Yeah.
Because this is your showcase. This is your first dip into the professional waters. Get wet. Jump in and show me a world-class record time, okay? That's what I do. And I'm the guy who picks up more trash than anybody because I'm going to be the best at whatever I do. I'm going to be better than anybody else. And if it's trash, it's trash. But you won't beat me.
Set the example.
Set the example, baby.
Yep. This could turn into a whole separate conversation, but yeah, I mean, I was going through this with Evan Turner. We had the opportunity to stop by the booth where Evan Turner and Andre Iguodala were having their Point Forward podcast there in the concourse, and I was chatting with Evan Turner, former number 2 overall pick, 2010 draft, and he had the same thoughts about it. With got Paolo in the draft number 1, he plays 2 games and then sits. Summer League is definitely more structure there. I watched the Drew League. I watched the crossover, the Seattle Showcase. And it's like an all-star game, basically. There's not really any defense. It's just throwing up lobs and, trying out new dribble moves. Essentially, it's just, do whatever you want. So
it's
100%.
It's basketball that doesn't prepare you for the NBA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because if you're going to play in the NBA, you do a NBA-type workout every day. You go hard. You don't shoot lazy jumpers. You shoot in-game jumpers. That's how you get in there.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert, but I've been around a lot of experts. And I certainly, through osmosis, I figure out who can be an NBA player and who can't. And it's only because I've been doing this for 30 plus years. So guys,
there you have it. 30 plus years.
Sorry to talk in years off. I hope they're not bleeding.
Oh no, you're good.
Not at all.
It's way longer than I thought.
Can't get this anywhere else. So we're just happy to be part of the experience.
All
but
right.
Warren, thanks so much again for joining us. This is an incredible conversation.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
So,
yes, sir.
We still want to be an agent, or we don't want to be an agent? Are we still good there?
Warren, you know what? I might have to, reach out to you and have this conversation because I'd love to continue picking your brain. But, I feel like
Well, pick it while I still remember it, okay?
Yeah. I would love to pursue it because I have put my mind, I have put my talents, I have put a lot of effort into it to see where it would take me. I want to see it through. If it's not for me, it's not for me. But I do want to see, hey, I want to be able to say, hey, I did try it, I did pursue it, and I put my heart into it. If it's there, it's there. It's not, it's not.
Be true to thyself, no question. That's the only way you can do it. But realize as long as you're willing to accept the risk and sometimes a lot of the potential, the anguish that comes with it. Because look, it can be as exhilarating, most affirming when a player tells you, man, you changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
There is nothing like it.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no bigger high. There's no more greater satisfaction. But there's others where you just feel like no matter what I do, it's just not good enough. I can't get any traction.
Yeah.
And you look in the mirror and you start beating yourself up. You think it's you, and maybe it is, but you don't always know. And maybe it's the talent. But those are really lonely and desperate moments because it makes you question yourself. And then ultimately, if you still believe in what you're doing, and when you question yourself, you still come back to say, no, I'm still on the right path.
Yeah.
Or there'll be a time where you say, you know what? You're right. I really screwed up here and I shouldn't have done it. But whatever it is, you have to have those hard talks with yourself. And more importantly, you got to be really, really honest so you don't trick yourself into believing something that's not true.
Yeah.
If you can do that, all you can say is, I was honest with myself. And there's no better feeling than that, where you know that, I gave it my true effort. I didn't cheat. I got all the music out. And if it was meant to be or not meant to be, so be it. Yeah. Good luck.
Beautiful perspective. I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
All right, baby.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. You never know if it's going to work out until you try it. But
hey, congratulations on growing something out of nothing. There's nothing greater than that, where you had a vision, you saw something that other people didn't, and you found a space for it. And more importantly, you found an audience. That's huge. That's gigantic.
Absolutely.
It makes Albert and I both proud papas that know that, we help, no matter what, we provided a forum that helped give birth to this. And again, that's like being good agents too. There's nothing more satisfying than watching other people grow and prosper from something that you were able to help with. And it's terrific. Congratulations, guys.
Thank you.
Forever thankful for the opportunity.
Right back at you.
And speaking of opportunities, I mean, that's how we got our start with Sports Business Classroom. So we plug this every episode. We just tell people here that there is the Business of Basketball experience. The Las Vegas one just finished up. Warren was a part of that. There's several other people huge in the basketball world that give a lot of great wisdom there. But there are going to be future courses. There's virtual courses coming up here throughout the year. So if you guys want to get involved
and that's something we're also going to listen carefully at. What are the things that people want that we're not doing or doing enough of? And that's where we don't get arrogant. The last thing you can do is be arrogant. Always be humble enough to know that your course or things that you want to offer may not be enough, or we may not be doing enough of. But whatever it is, stay humble enough to know that it can always be better. And that's something I think that we've been really good at.
Definitely.
Okay.
So,
all right.
sportsbusinessclassroom.com, guys. If you guys want to get involved, there you have it. The link is down below. But that's going to do it for us for this episode. A great time as always. Ali, Warren, you guys are awesome. Really appreciate the opportunity. And Warren, we'll definitely keep in touch. And just, congrats on everything you guys were able to do with Summer League. It's been an incredible accomplishment.
Thank you very much. Humbly accepted. But again, if it wasn't for you guys and everybody else making it that way, we couldn't have done it alone. So thanks for your help too. All right.
100%.
All right.
Well, until next time, everybody, thanks for joining this broadcast. And we'll see you here on the next installment of NTC. Take care, everybody.
Look forward to it. Thank you, guys.
And that concludes this episode of the Sports Business Classroom audio experience. I'm your host, John Hartofilis, and thank you for your continued support of SBC and everything we do in trying to grow, promote, and cultivate the next generation of leaders in the sports industry. Warren is incredibly involved in every SBC event, and this episode highlighting his story, the highs, lows, and everything in between of being an MBA agent, as well as so many key tips on how to network and connect with people in the industry effectively, is a small taste of what you can experience at SBC. You can check out more about SBC at sportsbusinessclassroom.com. Thanks for listening.